Welcome to the Retiring Canada podcast, where our mission is to educate and empower you to make the most informed, rational, and productive financial decisions. Hosted by certified financial planner, author, and chartered investment manager Michael Isbister, you'll go behind the scenes to uncover the tips and strategies to help you invest smarter, optimize your retirement income, and reduce the amount of tax you pay. Michael is an investment advisor with Fundamental Wealth, a trade name of Harbourfront Wealth Management, an IROC dealer. And now, here's your host, Michael Isbister.
Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Retiring Canada podcast. In today's episode, we're going to discuss how you can help your kids buy their first home by helping them set up a first home savings account. Specifically, I'm going to discuss how does it compare to the TFSA and RRSP? What is the FHSA and how does it work? Who can open an FHSA and what are the restrictions? What if a home is not purchased? Why every eligible person should open this account even if they don't plan on to buy a home? Why it's so important to open one of these sooner than later? And lastly, a few action items for you to consider. Let's get into it. Now, home ownership holds a special place in Canadians' hearts. To most, it's a sign of progress, growth, and a step in the right financial direction. However, the dream of owning a home is becoming more and more difficult with rising interest rates, a slowing economy, persistent inflation, and high home prices. While all of the factors I just mentioned may vary depending on the province or territory you live in, one thing remains constant. If you want to one day own a home, you need to have a down payment. Now, over the years, we have helped many clients create a strategy to help their kids buy their first home, whether it be gifting money for a down payment or signing as a guarantor or co-sign on their kids' first mortgage. There are a number of different options that can be considered. I myself had some help from my parents when I first purchased my first home. I had scratched and clawed my way into getting a down payment, but still needed some help on the mortgage application. As I was single at the time, my income and debt service ratios were on the borderline of what the bank would accept. So again, I had to ask my parents to help co-sign. Co-signing is another ball of wax that we may, choose to cover on future episodes. But I think the key thing you need to understand is that this kind of help also has credit risk to you as the co-signee. So if your kid doesn't make their payments, your phone will start to ring. Luckily for my parents, their son is a financial planner. So the moment my debt service ratios were in line, I had them removed from the mortgage. All right, so back to the purpose of this episode. So earlier this year, the Canadian government announced this new registered account called the First Home Savings Account. And I may refer to it here as the FHSA. Now, this account is the government's answer to high home prices and attempt to help Canadians save for their first home. Now, as you may know, there are a number of other methods already available for Canadians to save for their down payment. Now, the first plan that is already in place is called the Home Buyers Plan, which is a special program that allows qualified buyers to access money from their RRSP. The plan allows an individual to take up to $35,000 from their RRSP for a qualified property and is subject to some other qualification requirements. However, there is a catch. After the Home Buyers Plan withdrawal is taken out to purchase a home, it must be repaid within 15 years, with a minimum of 1/15 being paid back annually. If the annual payment is not made, the amount payable would be included as taxable income for that tax year. Furthermore, in order to be able to contribute to an RRSP in the first place, your kid would need to have earned income to generate contribution room, and the money must be contributed and stay contributed in the RRSP for at least 90 days to be eligible for the Home Buyers Plan. The other option to help save for a down payment is, of course, the tax-free savings account, the TFSA. When compared to the RRSP for home down payment savings, it is the more flexible option. However, again, there are age and contribution limits, and it lacks the tax deductibility of RRSP contributions. This is where the FHSA steps in. Again, the First Home Savings Account is a registered plan that allows prospective first home buyers to save for their first home tax-free. It combines the features of a TFSA and an RRSP with tax-deductible contributions and tax-free withdrawals if criteria are met. Unlike the home buyers plan previously mentioned, annual repayments do not need to be made to the FHSA. One of the key aspects to consider is that the eligible contribution room does not start automatically like a TFSA when you turn 18. The FHSA, you must open it in order to get the ball rolling on your contribution room. So if you are considering helping your kids save for a down payment, ask them to open an FHSA before the end of the year. If they open the plan and contribute $100, your kid will have generated $8,000 in total contribution room for 2023 and another $8,000 in 2024. So technically, on January 1st, 2024, a $15,900 top-up contribution could be made. Now, just to be clear here, when I say helping your kids out, I'm saying gifting them money directly so they can make a contribution to this kind of account. The account must be in your kid's name, not in your name and not joint. This means that they have control over the money and the account. Here are a few other important things about the FHSA I think you should know about. First, the account holder must be 18 years of age and a Canadian resident when the account is opened. In some provinces, the minimum age is 19. Next, the account holder and spouse must be considered a first-time homebuyer. More on that in a bit. Next, the annual contribution room does not start until an account is opened. So again, if you're considering opening an account for yourself or helping your children or grandchildren, be sure to do so before the end of the year. The annual contribution limit is $8,000 and the lifetime limit is $40,000. Up to $8,000 in unused contributions can be carried forward to the following year. Next, the money from an RRSP or a TFSA can be transferred to a new FHSA. And lastly, if the account holder decides to not use the funds for a house, they can transfer the money to an RRSP or RRIF without affecting contribution room. I think this last point is very interesting. Say you or your kids' plan was to actually never buy a house and you actually just wanted to rent. An FHSA could still be opened and contributed to. This would allow an additional $40,000 in tax-deductible contributions over the years. So in a way, it's, quote-unquote free RRSP room that does not require any sort of earned income. With this fact, even if your kid is unsure if they will ever buy a home, open an account with $100 as soon as possible. Contribution room will grow over time and will act as another tax-deductible account that can be contributed to until age 71, at which point it can be transferred to an RRSP or RIF and added to retirement funds. This can be especially important if later in life your child becomes common law or marries a spouse with a qualified home, which would then make them ineligible to even open an account. When we start to factor in common law or spousal relationships into this, things start to get more complicated. So here is the definition used by CRA and a few examples to help make sense of it. The account holder or account holder spouse must not have owned a home which they lived in at any time during the part of the calendar year before the account is opened or at any time in the preceding 4 calendar years. Sounds confusing, right? So, as an example, if you open an FHSA in April of 2024, the account holder could not have been a homeowner or the spouse of a homeowner of a principal residence since January 1st, 2020. Understanding the first-time homebuyer status is, pretty tricky. So here are a few other scenarios. Let's take a common law couple called Ryan and Lori. Ryan wants to open an FHSA. However, he currently lives in a home purchased by Lori and is considered a primary residence. If we assume Ryan and Lori's relationship subsequently ends, Ryan will not be able to open an FHSA until the 4-year time frame has passed. Another scenario could be where the homebuyer status of the spouse has now changed. So for example, let's take Jeremy, age 24, single, opens an FHSA and begins to contribute to it. A few years later, he becomes common law spouse with Teresa, who owns her own primary residence. Jeremy subsequently wants to purchase a home. In this case, Jeremy must not have lived in the qualified home as their principal residence in the current year or previous 4 years, where at this point the spouse is no longer taken into consideration at time of withdrawal. This is why it's so important to open one of these accounts as soon as your kid is eligible, even if the thought of owning a home is many, many years away. Now, there are a number of other details about the FHSA that I'm not going to bore you with. If you want to understand all the nitty-gritty about this account, I suggest you read the FHSA comparison document I've added to the show notes and then reach out to your trusted advisor for guidance. Now, with the spike of home prices post-pandemic, home ownership is a distant dream for many. Although we have seen a decline in some markets across Canada with interest rates increasing in a slowing economy, many Canadians wonder if they'll ever be able to buy a home. Perhaps we will see a further decline in home prices, making it more affordable for new home buyers, while at the same time eroding the net worth of Canadians who have already bought their forever home. Or maybe the government reduces interest rates, making it more affordable to buy a home while at the same time keeping home prices consistent or rising. I think either way you slice the current housing market conditions, it's tough out there. All right, so your action items from today's episodes. First, talk to your kids or your grandkids about the FHSA and have them listen to this podcast episode and read the comparison document in the show notes. Second, have them open an account as soon as possible, preferably before the end of the year, so that the contribution room can begin to accrue. Lastly, if you plan on gifting money to the kids, be sure to update your retirement income plan with your advisor to ensure you're not putting any undue pressure on your own aspirations and goals to have a worry-free retirement. All right, so that does it for today's episode. For all the links and resources discussed, check out the show notes or visit retiringcanada.ca. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to sign up for my weekly Retiring Canada newsletter. And hey, when it comes to your retirement, don't take chances. Make a plan so you can retire with confidence.
All comments are of a general nature and should not be relied upon as individual advice. The views and opinions expressed in this commentary may not necessarily reflect those of Harbourfront Wealth Management. While every attempt is made to ensure accuracy, facts and figures are not guaranteed. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing or tax advice. Please seek advice from your accountant regarding anything raised in the content of the podcast regarding your individual tax situation. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.